This is the second video about the Great Lakes Watershed Management System and its use to support the Improving Stream Habitat and Maple River Watershed Project. The goal of this video is to demonstrate the batch simulation functionality, which can help a user if they have a large number of fields that they're working with and find the digitizing and survey inputs a bit tedious to work with, and they just want to try and evaluate a large number of fields at once in one single stroke. And so I'll demonstrate how to do that. The previous video focused on the basics of the system and how to calculate a score and navigate the site, but this one will focus on how to take that a step further and utilize some of the more advanced functions to make it easier for users to generate results for this project. So I'm going to log into my account just to start. It's always a good place to start. So I'm logged in there. I'm going to step outside of the system and point out that in my desktop GIS, I have a number of fields that are all stored within a single Esri shapefile. I have it called sample fields here. And if I open the attribute table, I have a column called field name, which has a unique name for each of these fields. And if you have a shapefile with a number of different fields in it, that might be whatever unique identifier you might be utilizing. But it's important that it has a unique field name. I'll demonstrate why in a moment. But there are the fields. There are 7 of them in total. And I'm going to show them here because what you need to do is you need to find the folder in which these are contained, and you need to convert them into a zip file. And I already have one here. But the way you do that is you click on all the files, supporting files that go into that shapefile. And that includes these .dbf, the .prj, all of these. And highlight them all. And once they're all highlighted, you right click and send to a compressed file. I created another copy since I already have one there. And that's what the system will need, is that zip file. So go ahead and get rid of this one. We'll use the one I created previously. So I'm going to go back into the online system, and under draw fields, I'm going to select the upload fields button. And it's going to give me a description of what I'm going to have to do. I'll click start. It'll explain what I just showed you about converting all those supporting files into a zip file. And then it'll ask for that file. I'll click browse, and I'll point to the zip file, just that one file, not all the others, just the zip file. And I'll click open, and it'll tell me that it loaded the shapefile. Press next to continue. And next it'll ask me how I want to store this. So I could specify, maybe there is a project name within that attribute table. The one that I showed only had a field name, but perhaps there was an associated project. Maybe each of those fields were grouped into a different project that you wanted to capture here in the system. If there was a project field, then you could specify that here, and it would use those project names within the shapefile itself to organize them, or you can just provide a new name. And I'm going to call this shapefile upload. And so the system will create a project in my account called shapefile upload, and that's where those projects will be stored. And it's going to ask for that column name, the simulation column name. And this is the one that has to be unique. And so that's the field name here. And this is what the value for each of those fields, as we saw here, was field 1, field 2. That's what it's going to use to save the simulation name. And I'll demonstrate that in a moment. So let me click next, upload, and it's uploaded them. And I can view them in my projects. So I can click on my projects here, or if you come back to it, your my projects button up here has an option to load or edit projects. I'm going to click on that. And I see there's a project here. Everything in here is organized by projects. There's a project called Shapefile Upload. And in it, there are 7 records, 1 for each field. I can click on each one. Switch over to aerial. And it only loads 1 field at a time this way. But all the ones that were in my desktop GIS are now in here, and I can start to interact with each of them and run simulations for each of them. But if I had a large number of fields, say 30 or more, it might be difficult to come back to each field and run a simulation, save the result, etc. In that instance, there is an option for batch simulations. So under My Projects, if I click Batch Simulations, it'll give me a preview of what I'm going to do, which is to select a number of simulations already saved to my account and run them in a batch mode. So I'll click Begin. It'll ask you to select the simulations you want to include in the batch. I can filter them by project. It defaults by showing all these scenarios in my account, but I want the ones that I just uploaded. And I'm going to use the Shift Select to select all of them. And I click Add to the batch. And they're down there now. Click Continue. And now it wants me to describe those fields. Now, one of the limitations of this approach is that we can pick one scenario, for example, a conventional till to a no-till conversion with a cover crop, and that will apply to all the fields. So I'm not able to specify different scenarios for each of these 7 fields that I'm including in this batch. To do that, I would have to go through the system field by field and specify the changes for each. But if I just wanted to do a quick evaluation on all of them, then I could utilize that here. So under Field Survey, I'm going to be asked to specify what the scenario is I want to evaluate. And continuing from the previous tutorial in which I looked at going from a corn soy rotation to a corn soy wheat rotation, going from conventional till to no-till, and going from not implementing a cover crop to utilizing a cover crop. And we'll leave the field as untiled. And I'll click Submit. And now it's going to use that description on all the fields. And next it's going to ask me how I would like to store these simulations. And I have a couple options. I could store it in a new project in my account, which would be shapefile upload batch, in which I'd have a new project on my sidebar here called shapefile upload batch, and the results would be stored within there. I also have the option to store it in an existing project. I could store it within each of these fields' current project, and whatever values were stored or associated with that field would be overwritten. I also don't have to save anything. I could just let the system run and send me a spreadsheet when it's done. I'm going to let it store it in a new project. Click Continue. And we'll say Begin Batch Simulations. And when it's done, it will be emailed to the email account associated with your login. And it might take a while depending on how many fields you have. If you're trying to process 30 fields, it could take over half an hour to complete all those simulations and email them to you. But when it is done, you'll get an email from IWR with an attachment letting you know that the batch simulation you requested was complete. And it would look something like this. It comes as a CSV file, which you can open in any spreadsheet editor. Each of the fields are listed first. Below are the module parameters that you specified. So we have the baseline land cover or best management practice, which was conventional tillage. And we're adopting a no-till with a cover crop, or that's represented by this NCC abbreviation. We have the baseline land cover, the proposed land cover. We also have those details from the survey down here as well. And then above it has the modeled results. We have the acreage for each field, the upland acres that were included, the recharge modeling results. We also have the sediment and erosion modeling results. And then at the far end, we have the total points from the score calculator for each. And then we have an explanation as to how those points were selected. So we can see here that in some of these scenarios, we had 0 points, but that was because the majority of the field was in a recharge priority catchment. And since we were simulating cover crops, those did not enhance groundwater recharge. And so the total point of 0 is the total points that were selected here. But you could imagine that if you had 30 fields and you wanted to get a sense of how you could evaluate them quickly, this would be a useful way to identify which fields may not be the best to include in an application, perhaps to identify the 20 of the 30 fields that you might want to include in an application. And this would be one way to do that. So that's the batch simulation result. And I should say, this sent you the spreadsheet, but since I also selected that option to have it saved to my account, when it's complete and I log back into my account, the project and those results will display here on the side, and I can view them directly in the system.